Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. Senate Democrats demanded ICE reforms in the DHS funding bill, including bans on masks and requirements for body cameras and ID. Republican leaders warned the standoff could trigger a partial shutdown after Friday. FBI agents searched Fulton County's election hub near Atlanta under a court-authorized warrant tied to the 2020 vote. County officials said agents seized computers and took hundreds of boxes of ballots. President Trump warned Iran to reach a new nuclear deal and said a refusal could bring military action. U.S. officials said additional forces, including a carrier group, were moving toward the region. The Trump administration said California's law limiting automatic parent notification about a student's gender identity violates federal law. Federal officials said education funding could be at risk if the state does not comply. At a Senate hearing, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. does not plan military action in Venezuela, but would not rule it out. He said Washington is pressing its objectives. After Alex Pretty's killing, senior officials traded blame over the Minneapolis operation. Noem said her remarks were scripted by Stephen Miller, and Trump replaced Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino with Tom Homan. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani said the city faces a roughly $12 billion budget gap. He called for higher taxes on top earners and pledged a budget plan by February 17. A man sprayed Reptor Ilhan Omar with an unknown substance at her Minneapolis town hall, and security tackled him. Lawmakers condemned the attack, and police said the case remains under investigation. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. Minneapolis officials said city police will focus on local crime and won't help enforce federal immigration laws after President Trump demanded cooperation. Trump warned the city could face funding cuts as raids continue. President Trump shifted parts of California's wildfire rebuilding permitting to federal control, saying it will speed construction of destroyed homes. State Democrats said the bigger obstacle is funding and staffing for recovery. Alexander Vindman said his Florida Senate campaign raised $1.7 million in its first day, fueling a high-profile Democratic bid. He is running against Senator Ashley Moody, who was appointed to the seat. A polling memo circulating among Senate Democrats urged them to use the DHS funding fight to push ICE reforms. The memo said voters back steps like body cameras, identification, and limits on tactics. A CBO estimate put the cost of Trump-ordered National Guard and Marine deployments to several U.S. cities at about $496 million through December 2025. If extended, the tab could top $1 billion in 2026. ICE removed about 50 detainees from Maine's Cumberland County Jail and began transferring others out of state, families and lawyers said. The moves can limit access to attorneys and shift cases to distant courts. President Trump warned Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey he is violating the law by refusing to cooperate with immigration agents. Trump threatened to pull federal funds as targeted raids and protests continued this week. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said he plans to reduce reliance on U.S. trade after President Trump's tariff threats and to pursue about 12 new deals. He framed the shift as long-term economic security. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. Trump administration officials have traded blame internally over how the Minneapolis shooting of Alex Pretty was handled and described publicly. A preliminary watchdog report also undercut earlier claims about the encounter. New CBO estimates say National Guard deployments to U.S. cities cost about $496 million in 2025 and could top $1 billion if they continue. The agency also put daily per-service member costs at roughly $311 to $607. Trump warned Iran to negotiate a nuclear deal, saying the next U.S. action would be far worse if Tehran refuses. He also said a naval armada, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln, is heading to the Middle East. The White House is leaning on border czar Tom Homan to calm the Minneapolis fallout and help move a DHS funding deal through Congress. Democrats are tying shutdown votes to stricter limits on ICE operations. A Searchlight Institute memo circulating on Capitol Hill urges Democrats to avoid abolish ICE and instead push to reform and retrain the agency. The memo cites masked agents, identity refusals, and repeated clashes with court orders. The FBI executed a search warrant at the Fulton County Election Office in Georgia, seeking records tied to the 2020 vote. County officials raised concerns about evidence handling and chain of custody protections for seized materials. Senate Democrats are threatening to block DHS funding unless Republicans accept new limits on ICE, including body cameras and bans on masks. The standoff has increased the risk of a partial government shutdown. Trump warned Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey against refusing cooperation with federal immigration agents, even as the White House signaled a softer approach. The Justice Department said 16 people were arrested for obstructing agents during the protests. ICE suddenly moved all detainees out of Maine's Cumberland County Jail, with local officials saying about 50 people were transferred late Thursday. The sheriff said he wasn't told why, and Maine has no dedicated immigration detention facility. Representative Ilhan Omar was sprayed with an unknown substance during a Minneapolis town hall Tuesday night, and lawmakers from both parties condemned the attack. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries also criticized Trump for suggesting it was staged.